All of us peasants know that gold and silver are okay when things get really bad.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with the Miles Franklin Market Update, and we have a very special show for you guys today. We have our president, Andy Schectman, with us, and our guest, very special guest, legendary investor Jim Rogers. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here, Elijah, but I'm just a simple lad.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us today. And kind of to start with the first topic we wanted to get into was the news that just came out that Trump is not going to move forward. Congress is not going to move forward with any stimulus package until after the election. Markets took a hit from this, and you've talked a lot about how there's been so much stimulus, there's been so much debt added, there's been so much money printing, and now we're seeing a slight halt to this. I don't think, at least in my opinion, that this is a long-term halt, but what is your perspective on where we are? How does this impact the markets and inflation?
Well, I will repeat that what they have been doing in Washington is madness. The amount of debt that they have added is staggering. It is good to be an old person in America because young people are going to have a staggering debt, a staggering future going forward. In 4 or 5 years, somebody's going to say, wait a minute, where'd all this debt come from? What do we do now? Other countries that have gone through this have suffered for years, and generations have suffered, and I'm afraid that's what's going to happen to my children in America. Having said that, therefore, I'm glad if they really are going to cut back on the money printing and the money borrowing and the spending. I don't believe them. I don't believe any of them. So I don't like it. I don't like the debt, but I certainly like that they might stop it for a while. I mean, Elijah, you look around the world. Well, Japan has done as bad as we have, maybe England, but most countries, America has gone just nuts, even compared to everybody else in the world, except maybe the Japanese and except maybe the English.
And Mr. Rogers, I have a question for you as well. I've been curious. There's talk about Congress allowing the Federal Reserve to deposit money directly from the Fed into a digital wallet, into the American consumer's Fed wallet, if you will. It seems as though the velocity of money is held up right now in the commercial banks. And as a way to circumvent that, to get the inflation running hotter than they would like, they are talking about this possibility. Do you view this digital currency, as a near-term reality, as a way to allow the Fed to enact policy directly to the public, usurping the commercial banks?
Well, Andy, I know that money is going to be on the computer. It already is. In China, you can't take a taxi in China using cash. You cannot buy an ice cream in China except on your phone. So it's already happening in some countries, and it's going to be all over the world. Governments want computer money. First of all, it's cheap. They don't have to spend, they don't have to print it. They don't have to account for it, transport it, secure it. They love it. And it gives them complete control. They will know exactly everything you do. They'll call you up one day and say, you've been drinking too much coffee this month. Cut down on your coffee. They love the control. I don't. I hate it, of course. I hate it, but they love it. So computer money is the future. Whether it's going to be as quickly and as stimulative as you say it is, I'm not sure that America's ready for that. If I have a digital wallet, one for them, I don't know about it. And, most people, or half the people in America don't pay taxes. So I don't know how the government would find them to give them the money. By all means, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. But how are you going to find me is the problem. I just don't think America's geared up for it yet. They will, but not yet.
What do the folks in China who have a whole bunch of physical paper currency do? Have they done? You're saying that no one wants to transact with paper currency. Has it all been turned in, or is it just more or less useless or worthless?
No, you can find it and you can use it, but few people have it. literally. And you get in a taxi, you try to give the guy money, he doesn't want it. I tried to buy an ice cream in Beijing a little while back. The poor woman, I mean, she was 19 years old or something. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't take money. She gave me the ice cream. She felt so sorry. I mean, I had money. She didn't know what to do with money. So she gave me the ice cream in the end. She felt so sorry for this poor foreigner. Yes, you can use money and you can get money out of an ATM, but fewer and fewer people use it and fewer people need it. I mean, literally, you pay for a taxi on your phone. You pay for everything. When the woman gave me the ice cream, I said, now I want a Mercedes. She didn't get the joke. She didn't get the joke. But no, it's disappearing.
Now, one of the things about digital currency, especially like Bitcoin, people say, well, it's decentralized, and there's a limited quantity that'll ever be mined. So some people say, well, maybe it can't be manipulated. We have some viewers who submitted questions, and one of them is actually about central bank digital currency, this potential that people are talking about. In your opinion, if central banks or the Fed did create a digital Bitcoin kind of currency, do you think it could be manipulated? That's their question.
By the government? The government can manipulate anything they want. And Elijah, if they don't manipulate it, they change the rules. They change the rules whenever they need to. You don't try, please. History is replete with examples of government, not just ours, all governments throughout history, changing the rules when it's to their benefit, and they will. There is going to be digital money. Many governments, if not all governments, are already working, including the U.S. government, including our government, are working on digital money now. So it's going to happen. But Elijah, it's going to be their money. I would remind you that 100 years ago, 80 years ago, you could use anything you wanted for money. Seashells, silver, gold, coins. Banks were legally allowed to print their own money. And it was legal. It was perfectly legal. But then in the 1930s, the Bank of England, which was the most important bank in the world at the time, said, from now on, it is an act of treason to use anything for money except our money. Well, Elijah, treason means they execute you. So people stop using other money. And all the Bitcoin, all the crypto guys say we're smarter than the government. And they are. We know they're smarter than the government. But the government has guns and soldiers and tanks. And if the government says it's an act of treason, most people will stop using cryptocurrencies and will use the government money. Some might try, but not me. I don't want to get shot.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that to be true. One of our questions from a listener revolves around the LIBOR. And last I looked, Mr. Rogers, the regulators in the United States, the UK, and the European Union had fined the major commercial banks somewhere between $9 and $10 billion for manipulating the LIBOR market. So sticking with the topic of manipulation, Isaac asks, what will the effects of the LIBOR rate coming to an end at the end of next year have?
Well, that's a very good question. We're going to have interest rates somehow. We may go back to purely being set by governments, which I hope doesn't. I hope it doesn't happen. But somehow or another, somebody on the computer, on the internet, is going to figure out a way to sort out interest rates. I don't have a good answer, Andrew, but I know it. I know we're going to have interest rates. I know they're going to be international, or at least national, depending on where you are. And I would suspect it's going to be over the internet, but maybe it's not going to be LIBOR. LIBOR was manipulated. Back to your earlier question, anything can be manipulated eventually, especially if you're the government. And I'm not the first person to know that about history and about the world. It's not a good statement, but it can happen.
Definitely. We've even seen the government try to manipulate gold, right? When we look at the nationalization of gold back in the 1930s, where FDR, requested that people turn in their gold. So
Elijah, he didn't request, he ordered.
He ordered them, yeah. Yeah.
You read the order. It's not a request. It's pretty draconian. You better do it or you're going to suffer, including you better open your safety deposit boxes so we can see them.
Definitely. It definitely was an order. Yeah. Now, Paul is wanting to know, do you think this kind of confiscation, nationalization, do you think this could happen in the future?
Of course. I want to repeat, Elijah, anything can happen and has happened throughout history. We just talked about it. But since the beginning of the American Republic, metal was the basis for money. You read the original act in 1792, it was silver. Then, of course, later they added gold and silver became the basis for money all over the world. Contracts were written specifically denominated in certain amounts of gold. These were legal contract, 30-year bonds, for instance. It was right there. And the government came along and said, well, sorry, we're going to change all that. We're going to throw out all the laws that all of you have grown up with for decades, and everything that you have agreed to for decades. We're throwing it out this afternoon. You listen to our new laws. Elijah, I don't like saying this, but I've been around long enough and I've read a lot of history and I've invested all over the world for decades. They will always change. And you know what, Elijah, they will say, this is for your own good. We're doing this for you, for your own good. This will make life better for you. Ha! It's for them. It's to give them more control. That's because they've fouled up and made mistakes. And so they changed the rules. Can it happen? Yes, it can happen, and yes, it will happen.
Yeah, and that definitely brings up a good point that they can change the rules at any time. Some people think about, investing in numismatic coins, which, there is a good argument to be made that possibly it would be less likely for the government to confiscate those. But in the end, are there any specific ways that you would maybe recommend for people to kind of hedge their bets, maybe have storage outside the United States or in different countries? Like how do people hedge their bets against confiscation?
Well, everyone should have investments in other countries as a way to make money, if nothing else. There are always many opportunities. There are a couple of hundred countries in the world. Some of them are always doing better than others. So as a way to be an intelligent investor, you should look at other countries. And as an insurance policy, you should definitely, we all have fire insurance. We hope we never use our fire insurance, but we all have it. Likewise, you should learn about investing and having assets in other countries as a plan B. Now, even that, Elijah, can backfire. They can change the rules on that, but at least you have a start. In some countries, they make it illegal to have foreign bank accounts. It may well happen in America someday. So, yes, it is an opportunity as well as insurance, in my view. If you have a farm in a foreign country, it's very difficult for them to say, okay, bring your farm home. They can make you close your bank account, but a farm is a little complicated having assets like that. But Elijah, I don't trust any politicians. I've seen what they've done throughout history. They may figure out a way to make you bring your farm home.
Well, I guess you've already answered the question then, because Paul also asks, are you still bullish on agricultural commodities in the next 1 or 2 years? I think you've kind of just answered that. I think the answer is yes, correct?
Well, yes, and I'll just expand a little bit. As I look around the world, the cheapest asset class I see, bonds are clearly in a bubble nearly worldwide. Stocks in America are near all-time highs. The cheapest asset class I see in the world is commodities, especially agricultural commodities. Sugar is down 80% from its all-time high. There's not much in your life that's down 80% from its all-time high, but some commodities, some agricultural commodities especially, are very cheap on a historic basis. Silver's down 60% from its all-time high. So there's some things that are still pretty cheap.
Definitely. Besides sugar, agricultural commodities, are there any other commodities besides precious metals that you would be investing in right now?
Well, those are the cheap ones. I try to buy low and sell high. It's not always easy, as you well know, but those are a couple that are very, very cheap on a historic basis. I mean, oil is down, but in my view, oil is in the process of making a complicated bottom. I mean, I'm a terrible market timer, so maybe we're at the bottom now. But my view is that oil is making a complicated bottom, and then 2 or 3, 4 years we'll look back and say, "Wow," and now oil will go up again. But don't rely on me for market timing.
I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Rogers. Starting in about 2013 or 14, we started noticing a trend. We started noticing a trend of foreign governments repatriating their gold. The Bank of Germany, the Netherlands, many of the European banks requesting their gold home. We saw central banks that started accumulating gold in late 2018, and in fact, more gold that year than they had in the previous 60 years combined. In 2019, those numbers continued unabated. And then one thing that I'm surprised that I don't hear more people talking about, and something that I've focused singularly on literally all year long, was the Basel III reclassification of gold. I'm curious, do you believe gold will be central to a new system? If not, why would they have levied gold from a tier 3 asset to the only other tier 1 asset in the world on par with U.S. Treasuries, which is, if Googled, a riskless asset?
I'm not sure U.S. Treasuries will always be a risk-free asset. I
agree.
100 years ago, England of Great Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number 2. But by 1976, UK went bankrupt. IMF had to fly into Heathrow Airport and bail them out. This was a country that only 50 years before had been with no rival, no equal, no second even at that time. So I'm not sure that the U.S. and history shows that many countries have been unparalleled and unequal and the firmest credit, and every one of them has lost that status eventually. So yes, the U.S. Treasuries are pretty safe right now. I wouldn't doubt them right now, but I'm not sure always that will always happen. But to your question, Andy, throughout history, all of us peasants know that gold and silver are okay when things get really bad. Academics, politicians, they all say, forget it, forget gold. What did Keynes say? It was a barbaric metal. Let him talk. Let them all talk. All of us peasants know that when things go wrong, we want some gold and maybe some silver. Actually, silver has been more common than gold throughout history. So yes, let them rail. But I'm not the only one who knows that in the end, gold will have a place in the world, and it may have the preeminent place in the world. I don't know that, but I don't see anything else that can have the preeminent place. There's nothing else that is internationally recognized, that is easily transportable, and that we all know. I mean, I can take this down to the local shop, and the guy will probably recognize that this is an American silver coin, and he would probably give me some bread. If I go down there with something else, he may tell me to go away and leave him alone.
Really good point, Mr. Rogers. And yeah, actually, one viewer, Jason, is actually kind of interested to know kind of your own personal story. When did you first start buying gold, and how did you realize that true purpose of, these precious metals that, as you say, all of us peasants know that when times get tough, we need gold and silver?
Well, I'm not sure I should tell you, Elijah. I will. I guess it's okay. In 1971, I went to Switzerland, to the airport, to the Bank of what was it called in those days? Swiss Bank Corporation, at the airport, and bought myself a few gold, well, not bars. I wasn't that rich, but a little bit of gold. Took it home. It was still illegal for Americans to own gold in those days. The law changed shortly thereafter, a couple of years later, became legal. But that's when I first started buying gold, because I could see it. Whatever's going on is not good for the world. And in those days, everybody, of course, believed in the U.S. dollar, including me, including my family. But I still said, I better get a little gold just in case. And have never sold any gold. I bought gold over the years many times. I still have all the gold I've ever bought. I've given some away, mind you. I've given away gold coins as gifts, but I've never sold any gold.
Interesting timing that you would have, come back with a few gold coins in your pocket, hoping you didn't get stopped as a international metal smuggler.
Well, in those days, first of all, it wasn't very much, Andy. But in those,
I know I'm being tongue in cheek.
People didn't pay too much attention to that sort of stuff. Nobody knew about gold and stuff in those days. The silver market had only been freed up in America in the mid-'60s. They set the price of silver at $1.29 for decades, $1.29 per ounce. And that they only freed that in the 60s. The market forced them to. The market would buy all they wanted to sell at $1.29, so they realized we're running out of silver. And that's what happened to the gold price too. People kept saying, okay, we'll buy all you want. All you want to sell us at $35 an ounce. Well, eventually, even the government realized, oops, this is a mistake. We have to change. We change the rules. Remember, Elijah, they'll always change the rules.
Definitely. They'll always change the rules, as you say. And actually, one of the other topics we wanted to ask you about today was this one viewer is wanting to know, you often talk about how, there's different things going on in the world, obviously, that China is going to be the next biggest economy. And really what he's wanting to know is if he's interested in traveling, and finding different opportunities. Are there any specific places you see have good opportunities right now, places he might want to check out?
First, Elijah, I should tell you that I've driven around the world twice because I do have this. My wife says I'm a gypsy, that I just want to travel and go and see and see. And since I was a teenager, I can remember having that insanity. So yes, there's always some place I want to go and travel and see. Places now that would be extremely interesting to me. North Korea would be great. I mean, it's illegal, so I'm not doing anything. But, North Korea, Venezuela. Venezuela is a catastrophe. Again, it's illegal for Americans, so I'm not doing anything. But I have learned throughout history that if you invest in a country when it collapses, you're probably going to be very successful in a few years if you have the staying power. Venezuela at times has been the wealthiest country in Latin America. It will be again someday. But at the moment, it's a total disaster. So if you can invest there, yes, I would love to invest in Iran. Again, I'm not allowed to. It's illegal. We're citizens of the land of the free. As you can tell, we're not so free anymore. But there are places around the world where I know there are fantastic opportunities, places I would like to go to, but I'm not allowed to, or not allowed to invest. Just look around, Elijah. There are always plenty of disasters in the world. And I have learned, it's interesting, the Asians, the Chinese, the Koreans, and the Japanese have a word, which means one word means opportunity and disaster are the same thing. Now and by the way, it's the same character in all three languages, pronounced differently, obviously, but they've all been around for centuries, and every one of them has a word which means disaster and opportunity are the same thing. Well, I've learned that in my life, that if you can find disasters that are going to recover, you might make a lot of money. For instance, right now, the airline industry is a disaster. Well, it might be an opportunity for some of us if you can find airlines that I know we're going to fly again, Elijah. I know we're not going to take the boat to New York. I know we're not going to take the boat to London. We're going to fly again. Unmitigated. I live in Singapore. The airline has 7%. That's not a mistake, not a typo. 7% of its flights from a year ago. the airport's empty. So it might be an opportunity as well as a disaster.
One of the questions that I think dovetails nicely with that is, how do you stay so calm with your investments? If you see something and invest in a disaster, or invest in something that is when people are selling and running for the exits, how do you come in, trust your gut, have staying power, and remain calm through it all?
Well, first of all, I don't put my whole net worth into, if I could invest in Venezuela, I wouldn't put my whole net worth into Venezuela. I might put a lot depending on the situation. But I try to, especially these days. You know, back in the old days, we used enormous amounts of leverage, huge amounts of leverage, but fortunately, we'd done a lot of homework, and so it was. I felt okay. I never had any trouble sleeping. These days, I don't use leverage because I'm too lazy. Leverage is work. Leverage is great if you get it right, but it's also work. So I don't use so much leverage that I'm ever in that kind of risk. And I always think that I've done enough homework that I know I'm going to be right in the end. Don't think I don't make mistakes, Andy. I got made plenty of mistakes. But at least I always think, well, I've done enough so I know it's going to be okay in the end. And certainly with disasters such as Venezuela, for instance, I know enough history to know that eventually Venezuela is going to be there and it's going to be a great investment again someday. I mean, again, I cannot invest there now. I'd like to, but I've just been around long enough for things like that to know eventually it's going to be okay. You know, silver, I bought silver certainly much lower than where it is now, but I've been around long enough and know enough history to know that silver at $12 is not going to stay at $12, even at $24. Silver is not going to stay at $24, you know, during my lifetime. It's going, certainly not in my children's lifetime. It's going to be much higher.
Awesome. Well, Jim Rogers, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Before we let you go, any last thoughts you'd like to leave with our viewers?
Well, I hope everybody is careful and worried. If you're not worried, maybe you should listen to Elijah's shows and get knowledgeable. Once you get knowledge, you're going to get worried. You're going to get very worried because the world's got serious problems facing it. And if you get worried, you'll get prepared. And everybody should be prepared. I mean, everybody has their own way to prepare. Don't listen to me. Figure out your own way to get prepared and do so. I see Andy's got, are those guitars back there? Are those your guitars or those
Yes, sir.
Are they
those are collectibles. Yes, sir. Those are collectible guitars. Jim, one question for you, just to follow up on what you said. Are you nervous? Are you uneasy?
I'm extremely uneasy. You know, I told you it's a good time to be old. I'm very uneasy for my 12-year-old daughter, my 17-year-old daughter. I know that in their lifetime there's going to be collapse, there's going to be war, shooting war, and I hope that I can somehow prepare them to have enough knowledge that they will come through it all. The last 50, 60 years, we've had various and sundry problems, but Andy, never in my lifetime have we had the staggering amount of debt that we have in the world. A year ago, we all could have said America's the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and it was. Since then, America's added trillions with a T of dollars to its debt. Every day, the head of the Bank of Japan goes to work, goes early, turns on the printing presses, prints, as he says, his word, unlimited amounts of money. The debt in Japan is going through the roof. I will tell you just an aside. Believe it or not, I've had 3 number 1 bestsellers in Japan in the last 18 months. It's an accident, but I have had them. I'm not bragging. I'm a little embarrassed, in fact. But the message is, one of them is called A Warning to Japan. I mean, it is unbelievable what they're doing. The population has been declining for 10 years, and the debt skyrockets every day. And they don't let in foreigners. They don't like immigrants. So in 50 years, there won't be anybody left in Japan. I mean, the world's got some huge problems facing it going forward. And of course, I'm very, very worried. I look around and I see. I look around what will replace the U.S. dollar, because I know that in history, no currency has lasted forever. No currency has lasted forever. Even gold. Gold has lasted forever, but there have been many periods in history when gold has been, well, the Americans confiscated gold at one time. So everything can have its outs. Gold has not always gone up. There have been periods when gold and silver have gone down a lot in price. I told you, silver at the moment is down 60% from its all-time high. So getting all this right is not necessarily, I know it's not easy because I made a lot of mistakes in my life, but of course I'm worried. I'm more worried about how, in my case, I have 2 teenage daughters. How am I going to prepare them? Let's say that I can survive all of this that's coming. Well, I'm not going to be around forever. And I know the world is going to have huge, huge problems in their lifetime. And I don't know how to prepare them. I hope I can do it.
Yeah, me too. Amen to that, Jim. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know that I found it amazing to hear your insight, and I'm sure our listeners will too. Elijah, thank you for putting this together.
No, I'm just a simple person, Andy. I repeat.
Well, simple person with a heck of a repertoire of knowledge.
Andy, if I was so smart, I wouldn't be worried. I would have all the problems solved. I'd have everything solved.
Yeah, well, maybe these problems aren't fixable anytime soon, but the fact that you're aware of it and trying to help others tells me that you're smarter than you're letting on. So for as far as I'm concerned, Jim, thank you very much. I wish you nothing but the very best.
My pleasure. It's been great fun, Elijah, twice now. I hope we can do it again someday.
Definitely. Mr. Jim Rogers, thank you so much for your time.
Bye-bye.